So these are done with a 2 needle and it's called flat stitch. So we're gonna begin by threading our needle. So I have 2 arms length of thread, and we're just gonna begin. So this technique, you're gonna need 2 needles, 2 threaded needles. You're gonna thread each of them. So the way I do it is I just pinch it until I can see it peeking out, and then I just slowly pull it through. And then you're going to divide the thread into half. And then you're gonna make sure that the ends are fairly equal. I like to tie a double knot at the end of mine. There we go, all done. Okay, so the first step, you're just gonna need 1 needle. So we have our fabric, and then I have my little centerpiece. So you're just gonna position that somewhere in the middle. And then I'm just gonna poke a hole. So you're gonna always start from the back so that your knot is showing in the back and it's not gonna be showing on your beadwork. So there we go. Now you're just gonna poke the needle just as close to the gem as possible. Then you're gonna pull that through. This part, because you're kind of poking blind, you just gotta poke around until you can get through that hole again.
You're part of something bigger. Every
Oops.
stitch, every detail is with our traditions, for our community, for our
Okay, I'm just gonna look at the back and try and find the same hole. There we go. Couldn't get it through. Okay, and I'm just gonna secure each, so there's 2 holes. So I'm just gonna secure the first one 2 times. You can do 2 or 3 times, and then you're gonna poke, try and get through the second hole. There we go, I got it through. Then again, you're gonna just poke right beside the gem. Oops. Oh, I got a bit of a tangle. Pull that all the way through. Alright, there we go. We got our gem secured. And then now I'm going to bring up the needle. I like to just start from the bottom. And you're just going to poke until it's like slightly away from your gem. You guys can see that. And then we're going to start our first row of beads. So if we go back to the earring, so my first row is this light pink color. So we're just going to start, I like to start with about 20 beads. So this is going to be the 2 needle technique. So you're going to take your first needle and you're just going to put on about 20 beads. If you're fairly new to this technique, you can definitely start with a smaller amount, just because when you're using both needles, it can kind of feel a little bit uncomfortable at first. It just takes a little practice to kind of get used to holding the beads. Well, I guess holding both needles. Or maybe if you're familiar with this technique, you can even put on more beads. It's just kind of whatever you're comfortable with. So I don't know, about 20 beads on there. So the first needle is going to have the beads on it, and then you can kind of just put the needle off to the side. and then your less dominant hand. So my less dominant hand is my left hand, so this is just gonna be like your guiding hand. So you're just gonna push the beads around, kind of just positioning and guiding them as you bead along. And yeah, just kind of like wrap it around your finger, just whatever feels comfortable for you. And then your dominant hand, which I'm right-handed, so my right hand's my dominant hand, is going to do the sewing and the stitches. Right hand is gonna begin doing the stitches. So I'm gonna go in between. So where I'm looking to get my bead, or my needle, is in between the first two beads. I like to go from the inside of the row, so I'm gonna go in between my gem and the first row of beads, but then in between the first and the second bead. So once I like that spot right there, I'm happy with that spot, so I'm gonna pull that thread all the way through, and then I'm gonna go over the row of beads. So I'm going over the row of beads, and I'm kind of aiming to get in between the two beads. So the second thread is going to be just securing the row of beads by going over the thread. Okay, so I have my first little one done. Then I'm gonna do this, just repeat that, but onto the next bead. So I'm in between the gem and the row, and then I'm going over the row. So this thread is going in between the two beads. Now I got my second one done. Oh, my camera's wiggling. Okay. And then, so yeah, this hand is just gonna kind of guide the beads to where I want them. Sometimes you just have to poke around quite a few times until you're you're satisfied with with where you want your stitch to go. And you're just gonna continue doing that all the way around. I like to go between each bead just because I like the finished outcome. It's just, so once I get like fairly close to the end of the row, I'm gonna take my needle, the one that has the beads on it, and then you're just gonna put it through a couple of the beads of the same row, like the beginning of your row, and just stick that through a few of those and pull that through. And then I'm just going to continue to bead over the last few beads to finish off this row. Super shiny, it's very pretty. So I've already done a couple of them. The first one can be a little bit tricky just because you gotta hold it and it moves around on you. But once you get the first little loop done here, then you're just gonna go in between each one, and it's the same technique as your 2 needle. Oh, somebody's at the door. So I'm just gonna go in between each of these little diamond things and secure it. I'm just gonna do that all the way around. I like to do each one, but I mean, you can probably just do every second one. It's up to you. It's your piece, whatever you would like to do with it. No, I already did that one. I'm gonna go with the next one. And you're just gonna do that all the way around. So I'm gonna quickly show how to tie off a small piece of thread. Like once your thread's getting pretty short, you're gonna want to tie that off. and then add some more to it. I mean, this one you could use a little bit more, but just because I finished the rhinestone banding, I'm just gonna tie it off and start fresh on my new row. So you're going to tie a knot, and then just push it to down as far as you can. I just push it and kind of hold it there as I pull. Okay, so it's fairly close to the base, and then I'm gonna try and get another one on there. You definitely want to make sure that you have a few knots just so it doesn't come undone. You definitely don't want it to come undone. I did my daughter's beadwork for her regalia, and one of her beadwork started coming undone, and I was so sad. So yeah, definitely. So I'm on my third knot now. I feel like 3 knots should do it. And then just pull those. I mean, there's 2 that are actually on top of each other, and then there's a third one just on the very top. That should be good. And you're just gonna cut that off. Always do your knots on the back. You don't want to be tying knots on the front where all your beadwork is. Okay, once that part's done, you're just gonna take your needle and take off the extra thread. Then you're gonna get some more thread. So another 2 arms length of thread should do it. So this is how I thread my needle. So I just pinch it until I see a little piece poking out. Then I just push it through. Then I'm gonna just tie two knots at the end. There we go. All right, now so I've done 2 rows, and then I've done my rhinestone banding. So now I'm just gonna start my next row. So I'm just a little bit off from the rhinestone banding. Give a little bit of space for your beads. Okay, now I'm going to start my next row. First string has the beads on it, and then I'm just going to position them to where I want them. And then I'm going to use my second needle. And then I'm just going to poke in between the 2 rows. I'm going to poke around a bit more until I'm happy. Okay, so I'm in between the first 2 rows, and then in between these 2 beads. So you're gonna pull that all the way through, make sure on the back you got no knots. And then you're gonna go over that row and then in between the 2 beads. And then the string is gonna basically lay on top. Oh, sometimes that happens and I just pull them. Uh-oh. And then so the thread just lays on top of the other thread basically, just to kind of secure and position the beads. Sometimes you gotta poke around a few times, just until you're happy with that spot. and then I'm pulling it in between the two. So with these bigger beads, it might be easier to see, which I'm quite happy with. So the thread is going in between each bead. And I'm just going to continue on. Alright, once you got one tied off, then you're just going to cut it. And then you should still have a long one. Or if you have to tie them both off, you can just add some more thread after. Okay, so I'm just gonna cut. You could cut this piece out and then trace it, or you can just hold them together and just be extra careful when you're cutting. So if you have your stitches, ooh, so all your stitching here, you gotta be extra careful not to cut any of them. So just give yourself a little bit of extra space when cutting. I've never actually cut one of my threads, but I can imagine that it wouldn't be very fun to have to redo all the beadwork. You probably have to do like a row, take the beads off and then redo them. Okay, so this piece of thread here that is just hanging out, I definitely don't want to cut this, so I'm just gonna move it to the spot that I've already cut. Just make sure you're not cutting that. I'm just gonna keep on cutting along. Giving myself a little bit of extra room so I don't cut any of my threads. This backing is fairly thin, so it's not too hard to cut, but if you have some really thick backing, then you might have to cut them one at a time. Okay, I'm just gonna cut some pieces off. Okay, that looks good. So now that we have this, we're now going to attach an earring to the back. So I use clip-on earrings. And then it's going to go in between. So we're going to have to make a couple slits on here to weave it through, or to feed it through. So I just cut mine in half, and you can kind of measure. So I'm gonna need like a slit here and then just like a tiny spot there. I'm just gonna cut a slit there, and then so I have two slits in it. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your earring. I like to start with the little round part at the bottom. You're just gonna feed it through, making sure that part comes through. And then the ear part is gonna go into your second little hole. You just straighten it out. And then there you have that part. And then it should look like this. So what I like to do, I know I didn't add them in the kits, but if you have some glue at home, I just like to glue, I just have this, what is this? It's just some fabric glue actually. I just like to glue down these knots here. I had my daughter's beadwork come undone. one time, and I just assumed that one of the knots kind of came loose, but she was dancing around for a couple years in it, so I mean, it got a lot of we got a lot out of that, her little beadwork. So I just put in a little bit of glue, mainly just for the knots. And then I'm just gonna put this piece on it, the backing. You totally don't have to do this step. If you have no glue, that's fine. I feel like it just makes it extra secure. I actually don't know, but I just assume it makes it more secure. I just started doing it. I'm just gonna cut this piece a tiny wee bit. Okay, so now that we have the earring, the backing, and our beadwork, we can start doing the edging. So you have this piece of thread, and you need a fairly long one. So if we look at, oh, I'm gonna move that. So if we look at this, we're gonna do 3 little delicate beads. I'm just gonna use the white ones. And then we have these bigger bicone ones. So I like to start with the delicas. So you're gonna, only for the first stitch, you're gonna use 2 beads. After that, you're just gonna use 1 bead. So start with 2 beads, and that's only for the very first step. So we have our 2 beads, and then you're gonna just put it like 2 tiny beads width apart from where the thread is sticking out. Let's see if you guys can see that. So it's a small little space. So you're gonna go through the little bit of fabric from the beadwork and then your backing. So you're gonna sew those 2 pieces together while putting beads on. So you have your 2 beads on. Let's see if it focus. Okay. And then you're gonna go through the bottom. It's kind of confusing what the bottom is. But you're gonna go through the bottom of the bead, just 1 bead, the closest bead. And then you're gonna pull your thread through. So just the 1 bead. Okay, there we go. And it might look a little wonky, which is fine, because once you've done your whole edging, you're gonna come through this final bead one more time just to secure it down. So that 1 bead might just kind of be doing its own thing for a little bit. But see how that bead's sitting? That looks good. So now we're gonna add another bead on. And now we're just gonna do 1 bead at a time until we go all the way around. And it's gonna be the same technique for the little beads and the big beads. So you're just gonna go like a bead's width apart from that 1 bead. And pull your thread all the way through. Don't pull it too tight. And then you're just gonna go through the bottom of that bead. So your needle's coming out the top part. Okay. And now we can see that our beads are starting to kind of sit nicely together. So I'm doing, for this pattern, I'm gonna do 3 delicas, and then now we're gonna use one of the bigger bicone ones. So you're gonna throw a bead on your thread, and then you're going to do, so we got a bead on the thread, pull that one all the way through. And then you're just gonna do a bead's width space. Here, let's see if I can fix this. So you're gonna do a bead's, just kind of estimate how wide the bead is. And then you're gonna pull that all the way through. Don't pull it too tight. And then you're gonna go through the bottom part of the bead. Okay, and then pull that through. And then you don't want to pull it too tight because it's going to need some space to sit up properly. And there you go. So you have that part done. I'm just gonna close this because I feel like this is gonna get into the way. I might have pulled that one a bit too tight because it's kind of going a little bit wonky. Pull it out a bit. There we go. Okay, there we go. Now we're going to do 3 of the delicas, but you're going to do 1 at a time. So put 1 delica on your thread, pull that one all the way through, and then you're just going to go fairly close to it, but like the width of the bead. Pull that all the way through. Make sure you don't pull it too tight. And then pull that down. So there you go. We have that. We're gonna put a bead on your thread. And honestly, don't feel afraid if you make a mistake and you're just like really not unhappy with it and can't really fix it. You can always just take the beads off, or you could like cut a little width away, cut it, and then take the beads off and then tie it and then restart again. I've had to do that many times when I was starting out, which is fine too. You're learning. Even if you've been beading for a long time, you still make mistakes. And then, there we go. So I'll just do another, so I'm on my 2nd delica and I'll do my 3rd one. Pull that all the way through, and then I'll just show you guys 1 more of the bicone ones. Okay, so those are sitting nicely. So put the bicone on the thread. Pull your thread all the way through, and then you're gonna make sure with the bicone ones you're not pulling it too tight because they need some space. And then pull that all the way through. Ooh, I like how that one's sitting. That one's sitting nicely. And then we're just gonna do that all the way around. So I'm gonna do 3 delicas and then 1 of the bigger beads. And you're just about done. Okay, so now I'm on to the last bead. I went all the way around. Right here for my delicas, I didn't have enough space for the 3 beads, so I just put 2. But I don't even think you can really tell, like if you're holding it from a distance. It looks fine. So remember the first bead, it was kind of like a little wonky looking. So now you're going to connect your very last bead into your first bead. So just put your needle through that first bead and go through the top of it, and then it'll pull them together. And then you're just going to put the thread, and you're just going to feed it through, whoops, through the back, and then pull that through. And you don't need to pull it too tight. There we go. It's looking better. And then you're just going to tie a knot to finish it off. So I'm going to put in a couple knots because I definitely don't want this part to come undone. Oh, it's stuck there. So I got 1 knot on there. Put a couple more knots on there. Okay, I'm happy with that. So now, just to kind of hide the knot, there's a little, and the string for the end piece, I'm just gonna put it through. You can put it through anywhere. I'm just gonna put it through my beadwork, and then I'm just gonna poke it out somewhere. And then just pull that through. Oh, what a baby. Okay, and then you're gonna pull that through. Make sure you're not pulling too tight because you might warp your work. So it looks like that. So the knots are there, and then the thread is tucked underneath. Now I'm just gonna cut off this piece, and you can barely see it now. Just